Hey everybody, my name is Christian Hyatt. I am the CEO and co-founder of Risk 360, and joining me today is Christian Wyatt, our president of services and our SOC 2 practice leader. He's also the co-founder of Risk 360. And this is video number 2 in a 5-part series about SOC 2. In part 1 of the series, we provide a great overview of SOC 2, what the framework is, and why your company is probably doing SOC 2. So if you're looking for that overview, head over to video 1. What we're talking about today in our second part of the series is how to get ready for the audit itself. So it's game day, the auditor's going to come on site. What can you do to ensure a successful audit? And what we're going to share today is kind of the lessons learned from doing literally 1,000 of these and what we've seen our best clients do, some of the great habits and how you can be successful too. And wait for an agenda today, we're going to talk about 3 different things. So we're going to talk about a SOC 2 audit, what you can do before the audit. So ahead of the actual audit itself, how can you get prepared? How can you prepare your team? We'll talk about during the audit itself, what to do to be successful and what to expect from the audit firm. And then also after the audit, what you need to do to kind of finish the drill and get a report in hand. So starting off before the audit, see if you want to take this and talk about ahead of the audit, auditor's about to show up on site. What should companies be thinking about? What is the auditor going to be doing? How do I ensure success for my team ahead of an audit?
Yeah, so I think this is where, planning is so important and hopefully, you know, um, good planning has been done ahead of time. Hopefully you've gone through that planning, that readiness. You've remediated any known, gaps and now you're preparing for the audit itself. So really you just want to confirm the scope hasn't changed in between that time. The scope for a SOC 2 audit is a defined information system. So that's the infrastructure software, people, data, and processes that make up your defined information system. Does that still meet the business needs? Hopefully, but if not, you can tweak the scope to make sure you're meeting those business objectives. Also, at this point, you've probably customized your controls, hopefully, but there's still opportunity to do that. Um, SOC 2 is flexible in that the criteria don't change unless the AICPA changes those, but the controls may change. So let's say you change the way that you're doing SDLC. That's fine. You might need to rework the language of those controls to reflect how you're doing that. So those are things to prepare ahead of the audit. That way, you go in there, you're speaking intelligently about the systems and the controls that are in place and operating, so that it's not surprise to the auditor or yourself that things have changed. Preparing the team for the audit, that's a big piece. Is there might be a point person on the audit. They need to make sure that they're preparing the team. So that's everything from, setting agendas, time on the schedule, conference rooms if needed, and making sure the team understands what's expected of them for that audit. Also, spot checking controls. This is something that control owners should be doing, but it's one of those things like you can't expect what you don't inspect. So that's the best practice is for whoever the owner is for the SOC 2 program to go ahead and do some spot checks and make sure that those controls are operating effectively. I'll kick it over to you, Christian. How do you build a great relationship with your auditor?
Yeah, I mean, some of the habits of our best clients are the ones who ask a lot of questions. They stay on top of it. They engage with the auditor. They might be asking if we're going to accept certain pieces of evidence, what our perspective on an issue is, even how to solution things. And as the auditor, we often have to maintain independence, but we can definitely provide the auditor's perspective because we see so many different environments. So that's kind of a key thing. Another one is having a clear project plan, and that's also in partnership with the auditor. So when are they going to come on site to do audits? What walkthroughs are they going to have? What's the duration? How much time do you need from the team? And the auditor should be helping you do that, but it's key that you're taking the initiative to reach out and get those things so that your team is not overly burdened from the audit and certainly not surprised. Another thing that you would think would be natural, but isn't always natural, is setting a status report cadence with your auditor. And this is all about setting expectations, asking the auditor for what you need to be successful, understanding where you're at in the process, and then maybe getting a weekly status on any issues that are arising or any bottlenecks that are coming up. That way, again, you can ensure a very smooth audit. One of the things that the word that I like to use for the preparations before an audit is your compliance operating system. So when we talk about things like control spot checks, preparing the team, that kind of thing, it's like what is the system of operation that you've put in place to maintain your compliance program and get ready for the audit itself? Um, Also, the control spot check thing, that's huge. There's 12 months in a year, maybe breaking up the controls into 1/12 and looking at 1/12 of them per month. I've seen clients do that really well. And those are really great things that you can do ahead of the audit to ensure success on the audit itself.
Yeah, I'll double down on that real fast just to highlight that. Like, if you're spot checking controls, like Christian said, like 1/12 a month or however you break it out, like you are probably going to have a very good report, and there's probably going to be minimal exceptions, if any. I'd say that that one thing is like a differentiator between, going into an audit and really not knowing how the audit's going to go and having some stress associated with that versus going in very confident. You've done your spot checks, you've helped, control owners make remediation on the spot or throughout the period, and going in very confidently to the audit. So I can't emphasize that point enough.
And that, now that I didn't put this, and I'm actually thinking about it right now, another thing that is helps clients be very successful is providing context to your team why you're doing SOC 2 and what to expect out of a SOC 2 audit, like the business case. It's the why behind the what. So for all of our clients at Risk 360, we offer a SOC 2 orientation session. And it's like an hour-long presentation where the leader of the business gets to talk about why SOC 2 is important. We'll talk about roles, why SOC 2 matters in the marketplace, the value it's adding to the business. And that one tweak has made a huge impact on the success of our projects just because everyone understands why they're doing this. What is SOC 2? Why are we even investing the time? And typically, when someone understands why it's valuable, they'll put more effort into it. So consider that stuff too. Like, how can you rally the team? So let's get into during the audit. So you've engaged with the auditor, they're going through the audit. And CW, want to talk about what can a client do to be successful during an actual audit to help them ensure project success?
Yeah. So, at this point, really, if you're the one responsible, for ensuring a successful audit, you want to rally the troops internally. You want to make sure they understand the context going into those walkthroughs. So, if you've got some members of IT that are going to be joining a walkthrough to talk about what they're doing around logical access and to show some system settings, make sure they have an agenda and they understand what is expected of them, what controls they're going to need to provide evidence for, so they can, go into that meeting prepared, get through the walkthrough, and minimize the back and forth that's required after the walkthrough. I think one of the opportunities is really to protect the time of the team by making sure they're prepared so that they can do what they need to do, but not have the consistent back and forth post walkthrough.
There's really two ways that I see this go wrong or go right most consistently. One is exactly what you said, CW, is managing the time and expectations of the team because they will need to do walkthroughs. So preparing them in advance so they know what they are going to need to speak to, giving them an agenda in advance, making sure that they actually show up to the call, that they're ready to go. That's really big. And I think if a company doesn't understand why they're doing SOC 2, you might get really busy people that just don't want to do another walkthrough with an auditor. But if they understand the why and exactly what they need to speak to, those go really well. The other bottleneck is providing evidence. So as a SOC 2 auditor, we're going to throw over the bow 100 pieces of evidence plus. There's things that you just have to provide to us. And that is a big burden on the team. It's not to be underestimated. And if we don't get that evidence on time, it delays the whole process because ultimately we have to get that evidence to test it. So our job is to make really clear evidence requests, make sure that they match the reality of your environment. Your job is to distribute those out to the team, set expectations, and gather them really smoothly. At Risk 360, we use a platform to do this. It's our platform that we've built called Phalanx. We distribute request lists. We have guidance. You can see what you've provided in prior years. You can see who provided it, and that makes it a lot more efficient. But some other firms use Excel spreadsheets and email back and forth. So you're going to have to work with your auditor to figure out how you're going to exchange that evidence and ensure a really smooth process because that's a key bottleneck in the whole process.
Yeah, no, that's a big piece of the audit itself is tactically, gathering that evidence. So, when you can use a platform and distribute the burden to the team, it becomes a lot easier to get through that.
Yep. Another thing I'll add is we've kind of talked about this, especially in our last video, that SOC 2 is not a rigid framework. There are opportunities to customize your controls. And examples might be like how you do SDLC. So some companies use DevOps or an agile development methodology. Some people are more waterfall oriented. So you want to make sure your controls match the reality of your environment so that when we request evidence or do a walkthrough, we're talking about things that make sense. So it's your job to read through the controls. And if you see something that looks weird, so maybe we say something's a daily process, but it's really a weekly process, or our change management controls are describing an agile process, but you do more continuous development, continuous integration, or something like that. Make sure you tell the auditor, say, hey, look, this doesn't match what we actually do. We do this, and we'll update the control, and that will impact everything. That'll impact all the walkthroughs we do, all the evidence that we gather. And from your team's perspective, it's just going to make a whole lot more sense because we'll be asking the right questions. So think through that process as you go through, and don't be afraid to correct the auditor if they have something wrong.
Yeah, I would like to emphasize that point as well because if you don't take any action when you engage with a CPA firm for SOC 2 examinations, they'll default by giving you a standard control set that they have used and approved internally, but that might not reflect any of your reality. It might be written in a way that's for an on-prem environment and you're built in AWS. I like it as an auditor when our clients decide that, hey, they want to customize their control set and they want to work with us to understand, what needs to be in there. Not only shows ownership on their part, but if their controls are customized to suit them, there's a high likelihood or a higher likelihood that they will go ahead and operate those controls because everybody understands what the control is saying and what they need to do to operate it versus, just having a template set of controls. So
Yep.
definitely work with your audit partner to customize that to make it something that can really help you operate a good security program.
Yep. And the last thing I'll add before we move on to after the audit is form that partnership with your auditor. And there are a few things that you should know are fair expectations. So one of the fair expectations is clarity. There should be a project timeline. There should be regular status reports. There should be dates and clear expectations on when things are going to happen. And if you feel like you don't have that clarity, they owe it to you to provide that clarity. So ask for things like a project plan, ask for things like weekly status reports. Most audits are only a couple weeks in duration when there's heads down auditing happening. The rest of it's like evidence gathering and prep work. So during those heavy sessions, make sure you understand that's going on and get some visibility from your auditor. The best audit firms will do that naturally, but if that's not been your experience or you're going into your first audit, go ahead and set those expectations in advance so you make sure you have a really smooth audit. So you're going to get ready for the audit before the audit. You're going to have the audit. They're going to say, hey, we tested everything. And you're going to have the temptation to say, spike the football. We're done. The audit's over. But it's not over. There's a bunch of key stuff that you need to do after the audit to make sure that you get a report on time. I've literally seen instances where auditors will complete the audit and it'll be 6 months before you get a report in hand because someone just dropped the ball. There's also a lot of stuff you want to do, like after actions reports, preparing the team, getting ready for the next audit. So this is a key step after the audit. CW, you want to kind of talk about what to expect, what to do, what do you do after audit field work is done?
Yeah. One of the big, pieces in SOC reporting is the system description, which is section 3. So you've got, all this evidence collection going back and forth, walkthroughs, and these are all, the assessment of controls. But then there's a system description, which actually makes up the bulk of the report. And that's where
Hmm.
you're describing the information system over which the audit's happening. And there's a lot of different elements in that. And once you set that year one, it's probably not going to change a whole lot. But every year, as part of your audit, you should review that because as the business changes, as processes within the business change, you want to make sure that those updates are reflected in the system description so that the business and its products are articulated in such a way that it makes sense to the reader of the report and you're putting your best foot forward. So that's something that if
Yep.
you wait till the last minute, often that becomes a bottleneck to timely report delivery.
Yeah, and that's a long piece of writing. So if you're not familiar with the SOC 2 report, Section 3, I've seen them be 100 pages long. On average, they're like 30 pages, but it is literally in paragraph format where you describe your product and the scope of your system. Technically, you own that as the customer. So prepare for a little bit of writing. The auditor should give you some guidance on that, but like CW said, it's going to take some time to get through that. And if you wait till the last minute, you're going to push out your report date. So ask for that as soon as field work is done so you can get through that. What else, CW?
Another thing is it's that second bullet there, making sure there's an understanding of what needs to happen to maintain the program. So, assuming that there's no turnover among stakeholders internally, and assuming that it's not year one, and you have a good understanding, um, you know, there's probably some processes in place that you can maintain. But if you're going from a type one to now, getting ready for a type two a SOC 2 type 2 examination, you need to understand that these controls, now that they're in place, they also need to operate in line with how they're written. So if it's, giving background checks to all new hires, well, all new hires need to have a background check. If it's doing quarterly user access reviews, those need to happen. So someone needs to be assigned to those controls and accountable for making sure those controls operate. Also, those need to be spot checked periodically, like we mentioned. So just ensuring that everyone who's involved and who has some responsibility is able and understands their responsibilities going forward.
Yep. Some of the things that we do, and I think this is best practices, you can hold your auditor accountable to these things, are we always do a client closeout meeting. So in that closeout meeting, we'll talk about process improvements, maybe things that are outside the scope of SOC 2, but you should keep an eye on because they're important to the business. We'll go ahead and get the audit on the schedule for next year. We'll talk about reoccurring activities that CW was just talking about. So anything that happens over and over again, like your quarterly user access review, your weekly team meeting, all that kind of stuff. And then how to share the accomplishments. So you just got SOC 2, what now? So we'll provide press release guidance because the AICPA does have some limitations on that. You'll want to download the SOC 2 logo. There's a process to go through that. How to use the report, how to get it on the website, all that stuff you want to talk about with the auditor. So just make sure that you finish the drill. Get that report in hand, set your team up for success for next year because this is an annual report. Have a solid understanding of what you need to do and when. And the last thing I'll talk about is if you're wondering how to do all of this, how do you maintain the program? How do you ensure that you have a beat on all the recurring activities? How do you communicate with the team? How do you spot check your audits? We have a free GRC platform that you can manage your entire SOC 2 program out of. So you can go over to phalanxgrc.com and you can sign up for our platform and it'll take you through a guided self-assessment process. It'll take you through a gap assessment, ask you a bunch of questions. It'll generate a report card off of those questions and with recommendations, and then import that into a project management feature, and you can start managing and fixing issues right away. This is all for free. So Risk 360 is also a SOC 2 audit firm, so we can help you out with your SOC 2 report, but we've created this platform just to help companies get security programs off the ground. We also have a ton of resources, so you can go to Risk 360 and visit our resource center. And we have videos, white papers, a whole playbook on SOC 2. So anything that you want to know about SOC 2, or if you want to go ahead and start assessing your company today for free, you can do that. We also have the next 4 parts in this video series where we'll continue to dive deep in SOC 2. So thanks for watching.